Taryn Briones as narrator 1.
Katie Neal as stage directions Act 2.
Devin Beatty, Act 3, Stage Directions.
Ryan Linton as Jack Worthing.
Elijah Lundke as Algernon Moncrief.
David Tyler as Canon Chasuble.
Olivia Garreau as Merriman.
Ryan Reynolds as Lane.
Micah Hamstra as Lady Bracknell.
Natalie Ruthven as Gwendolyn Fairfax.
Hunter Myers as Cecily Cardew.
Hannah Miles, Miss Prism.
Mac Hamstra.
Leslie Chu.
Morning room at Algernon's flat in Half Moon Street. The room is luxuriously and artistically furnished. The sound of piano is heard in the adjoining room. Lane is arranging afternoon tea on the table. And after the music has ceased, Algernon enters.
Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it would polite to listen, so.
I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expressions. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, so.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, so.
Lane hands Algernon the sandwiches on a platter. Algernon inspects them, takes two, and sits down on the sofa.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night, when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to superior quality of wine, so. I have often observed that in married households, champagne is rarely of a first brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, so I have a very experience of it myself up to present. I have only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding.
I don't know that I am much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It is not an interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I am sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane goes out.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Enter Lane.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Enter Jack. Lane goes out.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring anyone anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algie.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Jack down on the sofa.
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
Jack pulls off his gloves.
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. I've never spoken to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them.
Goes over and takes sandwich.
By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Jack notices the set-up tea table.
Shropshire? Yes, of course. Hello, why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such a reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't approve. Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you would come up for pleasure. I call that business.
Ugh, how utterly unromantic you are.
Jack puts out his hand to take a sandwich. Algernon at once interferes, slapping his hand away.
Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Takes one and eats it.
Well, you have been eating them all this time.
That is quite a different matter. She is my aunt.
Algernon takes a plate from below.
Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Jack advances to table and helps himself.
Well, very good bread and butter it is too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat as if you were going to eat it all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algie, by Cecily? I don't know anyone by the name of Cecily.
Enter Lane.
Bring me that cigar case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Lane goes out.
Do you mean to say that you have had my cigar case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There is no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
Enter Lane, with the cigar case on a platter. Algernon takes it at once. Lane goes out.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say.
Algernon opens the case and examines it.
However, it makes no matter, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I find the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it is mine. You have seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigar case.
Oh! It is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose we discuss modern culture. It is not the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigar case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigar case. This cigar case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone by that name.
Well, if you must know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes. Charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algie.
Algernon retreats to the back of the sofa and reads a note from the gift.
From little Cecily with her fondest love,
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells?
Jack follows Algernon to the sofa and kneels upon it.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some ants are tall, some ants are not tall. That is a matter that surely an ant may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. For heaven's sake, just give me back my cigar case.
Jack follows Algernon round the room. They quicken their pace and start a chase.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
You've always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answered to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It is perfectly absurd you're saying that your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards, and here is one of them.
Algernon retrieves it from his case.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany.
I'll take this as proof that your name is Ernest if you ever attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Algernon pockets the card.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country. And it just so happens that that particular cigar case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you'd much better have the living thing out at once.
My dear Algy, you do talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one is not a dentist. It produces false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now go on, tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigar case first.
Here it is.
Algernon hands Jack in his cigar case and sits on the sofa.
Now, produce your explanation, and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle for motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You're not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in the town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algy, I don't know whether you will be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. Wait, I'm going to retry that. Sorry. My dear Algy, I don't know whether you'll be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone upon all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Ernest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't all be a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You should leave that to people who haven't been at university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. I'm going to try that again. One more time. I was quite right in saying that you were a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean? Sorry, I'm going to retry that one, sorry. What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest, in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable, permanently ill man called Bunbury, in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I've already been... Gonna try that again. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, one more time. Gosh. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I have been really engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine anywhere with me tonight.
I know. You are absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dined with her on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, I know perfectly well whom she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I am not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I shall kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too interested in him. It is rather a bore. So, I'm going to get rid of Ernest. And I strongly advise you to do the same with with your friend with that absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury.
Enter Lane.
Lady Blacknall and Miss Fairfax.
Algernon goes forward to meet them. Enter Lady Bracknell and Gwendolyn.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you're behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That is not quite the same thing.
Lady Bracknell sees Jack and bows to him with icy coldness. Algernon turns to Gwendolyn.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. It would leave no room for developments.
Gwendolyn and Jack sit down together in the corner.
I am sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Herbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I have never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Algernon goes over to the tea table.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolyn?
Thanks, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Algernon picks up the empty plate in practice horror.
Good heavens! Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane goes out.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Herbury, who seems to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its color, from what I, of course, cannot say.
Algernon crosses and hands tea.
Thank you. I have quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I am going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She is such a nice woman, so attentive to her husband. Is delightful to watch them.
I am afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say, a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I have just had a telegram to say my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again.
Algernon and Jack exchange glances.
They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange that Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is dreadfully ill.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he is going to live or die. This shilly-shalting with the question is absurd. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice, as far as any improvement in his ailments goes. I'd be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury, from me, to be kind enough not to have relapses on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is the last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has particularly said everything they had which to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen, and if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program I've drawn out. If you will kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It was very thoughtful of you.
Lady Bracknell rises and follows Algernon.
I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few excursions. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People will always seem to think that they are improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe is so. Gwendolen, will you accompany me?
Certainly, Mamma.
Lady Bracknell and Algernon go into the music room. Gwendolyn remains behind.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact, and I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you.
Jack looks at her in amazement.
We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told, and my ideal has always been to love someone of the name Ernest. There's something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest?
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is. But supposing it was something else, do you mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care for the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
Oh, it suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. Has music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, no, really, Gwendolyn. I must say that I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, it's a charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack. If any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces almost absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only real safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you've led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you are not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mr. Worthing. What have you got to say to me?
You know what I have got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Jack goes on his knees.
Of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it. I'm afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. What wonderful blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that. Especially when there are other people present.
Enter Lady Bracknell.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from the semi-recumbent posture. It is most indiscreet.
Mama!
He tries to rise. She restrains him.
I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Jack and Gwendolyn rise together.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, shall his health permit it, will inform you of that fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. Now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me in the carriage.
Mama!
In the carriage, Gwendolyn!
Gwendolyn goes to the door. She and Jack blow kisses to each other behind Lady Bracknell's back. Lady Bracknell looks vaguely about as if she could not understand what the noise was. She finally turns around.
Gwendolyn, the carriage!
Yes, Mama.
Gwendolyn goes out, looking back at Jack. Lady Bracknell sits down on the sofa.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Lady Bracknell looks in her pocket for a notebook and pencil.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
Lady Bracknell icily stares at Jack, pencil and notebook in hand.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. Although, I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We worked together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be quite really affectionately mother requires. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove serious danger to the upper classes and provide leads to active violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 to 8,000 a year.
Lady Bracknell makes a note in her book.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What betweens the duties expected of one's during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one of after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
I have a country house with some land attached to it, of course. About 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't depend on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house. How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let out by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She is a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays, there is no guarantee in respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
Lady Bracknell shakes her head.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could be easily altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both. if necessary. I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us, or come in the evening, at any rate. Now, in minor matters, are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? Was he definitely a man of some wealth? Was he born with the radical papers, called the purple of comrades, or did he rise in the ranks of aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents. It would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me, and gave me the name of Worthing, because he happened to have a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did the charitable gentleman who had the first-class ticket for the seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I was in a handbag. A somewhat large, black leather handbag, with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Virginia Station. Oh, sorry.
Wait.
In the cloak... Sorry, I just said Virginia instead of Victoria. I need to say it again, sorry. In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate, bred in a handbag, whether it had handles in it or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary discrepancies of family life that remind of one of the worst excuses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality when the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion. Has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now. But I can hardly be regarded as an assured basis for the recognition process in a good society.
May I ask you then what you advise me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try to acquire some relations as soon as possible. It would make a definite effort to produce, at any rate, one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my drawing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing!
Lady Bracknell swoops out in majestic indignation.
Good morning.
Algernon from the other room strikes up the wedding march. Jack looks perfectly furious and goes to the door.
For goodness sake, don't play that ghastly tune, Algie. How idiotic you are.
The music stops and Algernon enters cheerily.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I know it is a way she has. She's always refusing people. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
Oh, Gwendolyn is as right as the trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct about how to die.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
This is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself.
A pause.
You don't think there is any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algy?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
I am sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. Goodness, we had a few fools left.
We have.
I'd extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas... What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
Oh, before the end of the week I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy. Quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. The sort of thing that runs in families. You had better much say a severe chill.
You are sure a severe chill isn't hereditary? Or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest carried off suddenly, in Paris, by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
Oh, it is all right. Cecily is not a silly, romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She has got a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
I will take very good care you never do. She's excessively pretty, and she's only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
Oh, one doesn't blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to be extremely good friends. I bet you anything you like that half an hour after they have met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, my dear boy, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. Do you know it is nearly 7?
Oh, it is always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Go to a theatre?
Enter Lane.
Miss Fairfax.
Enter Gwendolyn. Lane goes out.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
LG, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
LG, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough to do that.
Algernon retires to the fireplace.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mama's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I ever had over Mama, I lost at age 3. But although she prevents us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mama with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
Algernon, who has been carefully listening, smiles to himself and writes the address on his shirt cuff. Then picks up the railway guide.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require some consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. LG, you may turn around now.
Thanks, I've turned round already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling?
Certainly.
Tulane, who now enters.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
Jack and Gwendolyn go off. Lane presents several bills on a platter to Algernon. Algernon, in turn, after looking at the envelopes, tears them up.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can put up my dress clothes, my smoking jackets, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
Lane hands Algernon sherry.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
Enter Jack. Lane goes off.
There is a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I've ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
I'm a little anxious about poor Bunbury. That is all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury, it will get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They are the only things that are never serious.
Oh, that is nonsense, Algy. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Jack looks indignantly at him and leaves the room. Algernon lights a cigar, reads his shirt cuff, and smiles.